This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you by Globalspeak.com, new media consultants, corporate video and audio communications, video and audio production and distribution, live and virtual event production. Tag TV and Tag Radio is a service of Globalspeak.com, creatively delivering powerful marketing, video, and audio solutions. Maria, welcome to Tech Talk.
Oh, Frank, thanks so much. Really glad to be here.
Well, I got to tell you that there's certain verticals that are just seemingly exploding, and certainly the challenge with the digital economy to, say, for example, obviously retailing and what we would call legacy or maybe traditional methods of merchandising in shopping centers and retail stores and that kind of thing. Everything is under disruption, and certainly that area is not being isolated from some of the impact of the new technologies. But that said, it would seem to me, and I guess that's what you guys are onto, is that when it's all said and done, it's really about the customer and about relationships, whether it's old school, new school, high tech, or direct hand-to-hand, so handshakes, that kind of thing. Let's go into a little bit about that. I mean, how is digital disrupting the customer experience?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's completely disrupting it, right? When you look at what's happening today, customers are completely defining the terms of engagement, right? We want to be able to engage with whoever we want to do business with, where, how, and when is most convenient for us at that specific time. So it's really all in the hands of the customer. And when you look at it, I mean, look at what's happening today. Like, for instance, I do a lot of business travel, and when I need to get a ride from one of our offices to the airport, what do? I go down to the street, grab my phone, and within a couple seconds after hitting a button, I get information on my personal driver who's going to arrive, ideally in 3 to 5 minutes, to pick me up and take me where I'm going. And if that doesn't happen, if I don't get that information in seconds and they're not going to arrive in 3 to 5 minutes, I'm actually annoyed. And if you contrast that with what used to be, not really that long ago in the scheme of things, where if I really wanted to get somewhere and needed transportation, I would have to call on the phone a cab company, talk to, a lot of times, not exactly the most friendly dispatcher, schedule a taxi, and then hope that that taxi was going to arrive, because I really had no other alternative but then to call the dispatcher back and figure out what happened. Or go down to the street and hail a cab and spend 15 to 20 minutes watching them all go by full of people and not being able to take me. So it's just really turned the expectations on their head, because today my expectations I would never want to, my only alternative that I want today is, hailing that personal driver from my phone.
Sure. Okay, so obviously when you talk about Uber and Lyft and all that kind of thing, you've got to move into the space of this issue of the invisible before it becomes visible, and the idea that something like a company that literally has become the largest transportation organization probably in the world, it doesn't have an automobile, it doesn't own a truck or a physical vehicle. I mean, I think it's a case that you can relate not only to, I think, the conditioned response to the kind of things that we're exposed to, say, for example, in the case of, deliveries and pickups and getting materials from one place to another. I mean, there was a case when those things were a challenge, and now it's a case of a button being pushed, as you point out. But again, while those things are clearly changing, quote unquote, I guess, the landscape, can you really, you say that customers kind of get what they want, how they want it, when they want it, and that convenience factor becomes a strong selling proposition. But yet, can it really, I guess it can be can it be a differentiator? Well, certainly, I guess it can be a negative differentiator, but can it really be a positive one? And how do you build that and stay with it on a consistent basis? How do you keep that consciousness of mind in that experience relationship?
Well, I think, I see two questions there, but I think first, it definitely is a differentiator. I mean, you sort of talked about these companies like Uber, Airbnb, they're disrupting industries, right? There's nothing new about transportation like I need to get to an airport. That's been happening for decades, right? What is different now is these companies that really take digital and customer experience to a new level. So they're actually taking very old traditional industries and turning them on their head, disrupting them, where if the traditional players in those industries don't act and also step up to providing more superior customer experiences, in the digital world, they're not going to be able to compete, and they're going to have a hard time surviving. So I think it's certainly something that companies need to pay attention to, and it's certainly not just a fad type of thing. It's a trend, right? They really need to look at how do you live in this digital economy? How do you leverage it to create those customer experiences that customers like me are demanding?
Well, again, we see the whole spectrum of every single vertical, and a lot of times we'll say technology vertical, and we'll say, same thing, only different, meaning that when you get to the core competencies, the core technologies, the core marketing, I guess, and distribution methodology to a degree, those are all kind of generic anymore, and that really it's the nuance. It's that little selling proposition, the difference in the product that kind of differentiates you, I guess. But I guess the other side of it, though, is that when I'm not 100% clear yet how this thing unfolds and what it looks like and who is, say in the next decade. Is there such a thing as a customer? Is there such a thing as a predictive analytic that could motivate me to make a decision? Or do I have Oscar or Brill or Watson or Ellie or somebody already doing that for me? I mean, are you prepared for some kind of a technical assistant experience relationship? I'm kidding.
Well, it's somewhat true, right? I think when you look at all of that and where things are going in this area of customer experience, it starts back with one of the key things, which is understanding your customer journey. I described one of those that customer journey that I had and the customer journey I want to have, right? What are the customer journeys that your customers are taking? And how do you implement the processes and leverage technology to enable those processes to provide that, what I like to call an effortless customer experience? We're all busy, we have a lot going on, and we don't want to have to put a lot of effort into things that we think should be easy, like getting a ride to the airport when I'm leaving my office in San Francisco, right? Mm-hmm. So when you look at customer experiences and you talked about automating them, we'll talk about that in a second, but you look at what is a customer experience. And I think one of the most important pieces about providing the superior customer experiences is allowing people to do exactly what we talked about, which is when, where, and how. And that means facilitating the ability to let them communicate with you across multiple channels. We call that omni-channel today. And why we say omni-channel is I may want to interact, and we'll go back to the transportation example, in a single, what I call engagement, but across multiple channels. So happened to me last week. Left our San Francisco office, went down to the street, pressed my little app on my phone, right, called my Uber driver, and within seconds I got my indication of who that driver was, contact information, and ETA of around 5 minutes. Well, I'm always uncomfortable with, do they really know where I am? Right? Mm-hmm. So I message that person automatically, and I message the person and say, hey, I'm at the corner of 4th and Market in front of X landmark. So now I feel, and they reply back, got it. So now I feel comfortable. They know exactly where I am. So now I did a web interaction. I now did a messaging interaction. And then as I'm looking at that person on the app, seeing where they're coming from and looking at the nightmare of traffic, I realize where I'm standing is not optimal from where they're coming to pick me up. So I cross the street to get to a better position, but I want to call them at that point because now they're too close and I don't want to rely on messaging. I call the driver. He picks up. We have a very quick conversation. I don't have to explain who I am, why I'm calling him, what time I expect to be picked up. It's a seamless conversation across channels. And that's really what omni-channel is. And that's what consumers and expectations, that's where we are today. And that's what companies really need to look at. What's that customer journey look like for their customers, and how are they going to enable that in a very seamless way?
Well, let's talk about that when you talk about enablement, because part of what I'm listening as you're describing, you're certainly not saying that the future of customer experience is to disrupt your entire operation and come up with a new business model and become a Uber. I don't mean literally, but figuratively in your particular industry. I'm assuming that that's not what you're saying, but is that the case? I mean, there's a lot of discussion about what you were saying earlier, that in this transformation, the digital economy is going to create some pretty challenging marketing strategies for survival purposes. Because,
Yep.
And again, when you talk about, like, say, for example, one of the areas that certainly is hot right now is fintech.
Yep.
This whole situation, to me, fintech's a metaphor. It's a perfect example. Here are the bankers who have been dominating their market since money or transaction or trade or whatever. And now all of a sudden they're busy about their bubble inside their world, maybe going about through some kind of new technology that makes delivering a bill more efficient or keeping track of a certain estate or that kind of thing, or managing money lending situations and opportunities. All that's well and good, but you could, excuse me, but you could almost say that each one of those verticals have gone through a disruption. So here your banker is juggling all kinds of activity, thinking, oh, I'm busy and I'm doing a great thing. Problem is a man can make a mistake and call it experience. And so now the issue becomes, wake up, and all of a sudden fintech comes from out of nowhere, and now we see the struggle between legacy and digital future. And I guess what really, again, I'm posing is, how do you get that message? I know you want to, but how do you get it to those legacy people when they don't even really know they have a problem, unless there's a better solution?
Well, no, understood. I think that many of them do know that they have a problem now, though, because they're seeing, in industries, and really across almost all industries, right? They're seeing the disruption of players in the industry, like we talked about Uber, like Airbnb, and in financial services, some of the digital players. So how do you compete? And again, I go back to, you look at what is the customer journey and what are the customers demanding, and how do you, in your business model, and a lot of financial institutions are doing this today, a lot of their services are now online. They're becoming more personalized. It's allowed interactions across online, some of the other chat, messaging, phone, and trying to make that a more frictionless interaction for their customers. But I think it comes down to, again, looking at it and knowing that this is a trend, that you need to take your traditional business and start offering, those different abilities for your customers to interact in a more seamless omni-channel way across the customer journey that they're having with you. And we see traditional industries like manufacturers doing it all the way through, the new economy companies like Uber and Airbnb. So.
Okay, well, let's go into a little bit about precisely what Zendesk does. I mean, how do you help customers to get into the game and stay in the game and be successful at it? I mean, really, what is there an ability or a talent as far as creating a great customer experience? Or is it something that can actually be trained over a period of time, or a little combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both, right? I think it's a customer, most companies do, from our experience, are really focused on understanding what the customer experience is about. So they look at customer satisfaction scores, they do surveys, they do all kinds of things to really try to figure out how happy their customers are. And why? Because, the repeat customers are the least expensive to have, and they need to keep building their business and keep their customers happy. So I think when you look at something like Zendesk and what we bring to the table, we bring the technology and best practices, because we have over 100,000 customers, to really help our customers provide that true, what we talked about, that seamless omni-channel experience to their customers. So it gives, like we talked about, the ability for someone to be able to go to a site, be able to interact with an organization across a self-service capability through, hey, I have a question, so I'm going to start interacting chat, but maybe that's a very easy, what's your return policy, to, hey, I have a more specific question, and press a button to have somebody call and have that conversation go all through in context. And we also provide the capability, I think one of the big differentiators is the time to market. So we really give an agile platform to allow our customers to be able to implement that kind of a strategy in weeks to months, and not months to years. And that's pretty important, right? Because one, you want to get those successes early, and two, you want to start looking at the return on the investment that you're making.
Sure. Well, that's an interesting perspective, because for all of the years I was in the traditional marketing and advertising consulting business, and one of the things that you just kind of understood, that there was a certain structure. You had certain media to deal with. You could target audiences. I mean, the concept of, say, demassification and profiling and data and analytics and everything that's going on. I'm fascinated by the dynamics in terms of, say, for example, you set up a strategy and a campaign for one of your clients, and I'm assuming it's intuitive, and so it generates the data or even self-generates the corrections that are necessary based on its usage, right? I mean, in some fashion or another. My point being is, how long does a strategy last, or does it ever last? Do you just launch it and continually evolve it? I mean, I'm sitting here thinking change. That's all you ever hear. And so I'm thinking we enact a particular campaign, and all of a sudden our competitor maybe either comes out with something else that's better or more aggressive. How do you react in terms of that kind of a situation?
No, absolutely.
Or do you react?
I think you do, right? I think it's constant, continuous improvement, right? So one of the great things that, we see a lot of our leading customers do, and we help to try to facilitate that is, you're gathering, and one of the things about the digital age and it's the explosion of data and information that you're getting. So you're getting a lot of interactions and gathering a lot of data that helps you to continuously improve. Right. So to start understanding as you're interacting with customers, what kind of information are they trying to get? What are frequently asked questions or issues? And then you can start providing much better content and the ability for them to self-serve that content. Again, making it very effortless for them. So the information's easy to get to and there when they want it, right? And we have the technology to allow to do that. And then to use things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, all the newer technologies to help to continue to mine that data so you can leverage that data to provide more personalized self-service and more personalized responses based on the context and the information the customer's looking for at that specific point in time. So, yeah, absolutely. You want it to be continuous improvement because things are going to continue to change. Look at the amount of channels that we have today, and the channels are going to continue to explode. And what kind of information and service your customers need is going to continue to evolve over time. So leveraging that data, leveraging the technologies, machine learning, artificial intelligence, helps our customers to evolve their service to keep up with the needs and requirements and demands of their customers.
Quickly running out of time, but I got one last question I want to throw at you, and I guess it's kind of still trying to explain it to the individual who's just beginning to become aware of it. Forget about getting it. And guess what? They're probably most likely the decision maker that you're going to have to, or some of your people are going to have to address in order to convince them idealistically to leverage your capabilities. First off, what are some of the types of customers that you guys are working with? And maybe just kind of go into, do you guys do a situation analysis or an interpretation of the current environment and then recommend? Or do you take the experience and try to improve it and make it facilitate it to be more effective, or a little combination of both? Go ahead.
It's somewhat of a combination of both. I mean, we work very closely with our customers and really understand what their challenges are, right? How they're doing something today, where they're running into the challenges, helping them to really look at their customer journey as well as their agent journey, right? Because they have their employees who are there trying very diligently to service their customers and provide really good customer service. So we look at those, how they're doing it today, and then work with them based on, all the experience we have with our 100,000 plus customers to help them optimize what their processes are and leverage technologies that would make sense in the context of their customer journeys today. So that's where we try, and a lot of time it's staged, right? You're in the consulting world, right? You may, they may want to, they're already doing a couple channels. We may want to go to something more full-blown, or we stage it in a way that makes sense for them. And, we work with, it's interesting because we work with a lot of companies in all different areas. So new economy companies, we talked about Uber, and you look at a company like Uber where we help power the support for their customers and their drivers. And, I talked a little bit about time to market, and one of the reasons that, we started the Uber journey a long time ago when they were just popping up in cities and maybe had, city-based teams in a couple different cities, dozen cities or so. And they chose us because they wanted to be able, they were quickly growing. They wanted to stand up cities very quickly, and they wanted to stand those teams up, so they needed something that could help them get stood up and running very quickly and very efficiently. But yet we've scaled now to over 1,000 agents and centralized support with them. So we have the ability to get up and running quickly, but grow to an enterprise scale. So, but then, that's a good example of what we would call the new economy company, like you and I were talking about. Then we have some traditional players like Ingersoll Rand, who really is a much different player, manufacturer, right, does a lot of power tools, other things, and we really help them more power customer service and measure their effectiveness. This is based on evolution, right? You have to look at where are we today and how do we understand how effective our services and how can we keep improving. And they leveraged us to provide their support as well as understand and analyze that data so they can provide better self-service in areas like they were finding that a lot of the information that their distributors, for instance, were seeking from them were around orders and tracking orders. Well, they were able to then provide a very simple way for them to access that information very quickly and easily, so, upping their customer experience. So some good examples of the types of customers, everywhere from very small customers and very up-and-coming emerging economy to really those more traditional manufacturing-type customers and others.
Again, when I hear you describe it, another thing that we experience all the time is that not only is it the same thing, only different, but everybody wants to be a single source. So more and more things are consolidating and more services are being provided by, an IT consultant that might have done staffing now all of a sudden is doing network installment or something to that effect so that they don't go to multiple players. Is it a case where in your mind, from a perspective of the future of your particular industry, I'm saying that in a way, what does marketing or advertising or even human relations to a degree look like in a decade? Does it look like a Zendesk app or something to that effect, or a platform or a model? Because in reality, while you were talking about employees and working with them with an experience, I can remember when branding became a big to-do. Obviously, it's always been, but I mean, not just a logo. This was a representation of your company and your attitude and literally the first people that were presented and convinced that the logo was really good were the employees.
Yep.
So, I mean, in effect, you get where I'm going. So the branding campaign was not just a branding campaign from a creative design, but literally a cultural attitude change. Well, listen, Maria, I'll tell you what, you guys are really, really, and obviously an exciting niche. Cannot deny the fact, you hear it on the ground, the buzz is you guys are into something and doing it well. Continued great success, and hey, thank you so much for taking time out of a busy schedule to join us for a few minutes today on Tech Talk.
Frank, really appreciate it. Pleasure being on. Thank you so much for having me, and appreciate the great people of Georgia listening to this. And if anybody wants additional information, feel free to contact me or go to Zendesk.com.